In the name of God, who calls us to place our hearts on the pilgrim's way. Amen. Please be seated. I read an article recently by a pastor named Brett Baer, in which he talks about a term that used to be used frequently in the old days when it came to the church. I must admit, it is a term that I am unfamiliar with. It is the term backsliding. Anybody know what that means? Oh, a couple, okay, I got some hands, all right. Pastor Brett says he thinks that the concept of backsliding is still valid and relevant to the church today. He goes on to write that in his research on the term, he discovered that the term backsliding was popularized in the 1600s by John Bunyan in his very famous allegory, Pilgrim's Progress. Has anybody ever read this? Okay, one hand. Okay, I didn't have to read this in seminary, so let's refresh ourselves with the story a bit. In the story, the character of Christian and Hopeful are on their religious pilgrimage. While on the journey, they began to discuss an individual by the name of Temporary. See, he had started the pilgrimage, but along the way he fell by the wayside, or as Bunyan worded it, backslid. Evidently, the term was picked up by the Methodists and other denominations, such as ours, in early America, and it became a stock phrase. Okay? The term backsliding specifically refers to once faithful individuals, disciples of Christ, who lose interest in their Christian pilgrimage and, walk away. Today's gospel from John talks about this very concept of backsliding. We hear how Jesus is teaching in the synagogue in Capernaum, and he's not only speaking to the 12 disciples, but to other disciples who were following him. As Mary Kelly, our deacon candidate, preached in her sermon last week, the Gospel of John has no Last Supper story in it. And so all the passages when Jesus says, I am the bread of life, they're really about the Eucharistic mystery. But that's in hindsight that we look at this. You can imagine how those listening to him would be very confused and possibly offended. I mean, listen to his words. Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them, and they who eat this bread will live forever. Well, this is too much to take, too hard a journey for many of his, quote, new disciples to accept. And so they quit and no longer follow him. One day they are disciples, and the next day they are not. They are temporary, not committed to the long haul. And so by definition, they are indeed backsliders. Now this gospel speaks to us in a very profound way, I think, in our day, about the task of following Christ's way and truth and life, especially when things get hard, confusing, and challenging. Even when we're mad, disappointed, grieving, and feel like giving up on God. In Paul's letter to the Ephesians, he takes up right where the gospel left off. It speaks to us about what we are to do as we travel our lifetime Christian pilgrimage. Paul says, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his power. Stand firm. Put on the breastplate of righteousness and truth. Pray in the Spirit at all times. Keep alert and persevere so you can proclaim the gospel of peace. See, Jesus and Paul remind us today that being a Christian and leading a Christian life is not always easy, which no doubt is why the recent disciples turned back. Jesus was claiming, you see, to be a new source of life, a new manna, so to speak. Jesus was not the manna that God dropped from heaven in the time of Moses. No, Jesus is bread of life we have to work for or be open to. Having a meaningful, life-giving relationship with God is one we have to work for or be open to. It's not just going to drop from the sky like manna from heaven that God gave Moses. If we didn't have to work for or be open to Jesus as bread of life and a relationship with God, we wouldn't need spiritual disciplines such as prayer, solitude, service to those in need. We wouldn't need church services, no liturgy, no music. We wouldn't need faith communities around us, such as this, our spiritual home, to inspire, support, and lift us up when we are touched by sadness, tragedy, illness. Those times when it feels like all our hope is gone. We wouldn't need any of that if the manna from heaven, Jesus' bread, just dropped down from heaven. One of the most difficult tasks of being a Christian, I think, is learning to embrace the ambiguity, the doubt, the disappointment, anything challenging that leads us away from God and leads us away from Christ's way of love, peace, compassion, justice, and peace. And you know what? When we turn back away from God, guess who benefits? When we turn back away from God, guess who benefits? Paul tells us, the cosmic powers of darkness, the spiritual forces of evil, which are plenteous in our world and in our own nation today. A no vote for God is a vote for what? The dark and powerful forces of evil. They thrive on this. They count on us giving God a no vote. And what do? They pounce on us because they thrive on hatred, division, violence, prejudice, cruelty, intolerance, indifference, neglect of those in need, and those who are most vulnerable. They thrive on greed, lies, and deceit. In essence, they are wolves in sheep's clothing who are ready to pounce and destroy God's kingdom and lead astray us, Christ's disciples, who are called to emulate Christ's example of living. I want to close with a beautiful story that for me truly was an example of God's desire for humankind in terms of acceptance, joy, love, and inclusion. On Friday, Libby and I were sitting at a pool located near the West Virginia cabin that we have grown to love. And a group of teenage girls were at the pool having a great time. It was just them and us. They were playing some really cool rap music, which Libby and I love, so we're up there, shaking to it. And they were laughing and talking. And then they started taking all kinds of glamour shots of each other around the pool. And they asked Libby to take one of the whole group while I was doing laps in the frigid West Virginia water. And Libby and I realized that one of the girls was trans. And we were so moved. Here are these 5 girls, one who is trans, loving each other, accepting each other, and absolutely relishing in each other's beauty. No one was turning back or away from anyone. They enjoyed us too. I think we were kind of like their old aunties or something. These girls were welcoming and accepting each other. And that's what I believe God hopes for us. That we will not only tolerate, but accept and embrace all of us in our rich diversity as part of God's diverse creation. And so, friends, don't turn back. Don't turn away from God. Keep traveling your Christian pilgrimage, even though sometimes it is hard. It is the way to the source of life, Christ's body and bread, the bread which sustains, comforts, empowers us on our life's journey. So we can bring something new to life, so we can bring about something new into this world, which indeed waits, which indeed labors for a new age, a new day, grounded in God's love. Amen.